When I was 15, I started dating my first girlfriend, Casey, who lived just 2 blocks away in our calm, upscale neighborhood. One Thursday evening during school break, I decided to stroll over to her place. Even though it was late, I didn't have a strict curfew, so I wasn't too worried. Partway through my walk, I began to notice soft, rustling sounds coming from the hedges lining the sidewalk. First a bush shaking, then the crack of a twig. Each time I looked over my shoulder but saw nothing. Speeding up, I reached Casey's street, called her in a panic, and she appeared at her upstairs window. She pointed behind me. There, crouched 10 feet away, was a grown man moving stealthily. I screamed, dashed to her door, and pounded. He lunged, briefly got me in a headlock, then fled. Casey's mother let me in, called the police about the dangerous prowler, and let me sleep over. The next day, she drove me home. During a violent thunderstorm, I was relaxing in my bedroom while my family occupied the other rooms. A sudden, loud bang on my window startled me, and through the rain-splattered glass, I glimpsed someone pounding and crying out for help. I cracked the window and shouted back that they should use the front entrance, then ran to my dad's side in the living room to warn him. Moments later, furious bangs and shouts rattled our front door. My dad nearly opened it, but I stopped him. A call from our neighbor's number flashed on the TV as caller ID. When my dad answered and heard what was happening next door, he slammed the phone down and warned us to stay clear. Peering out, he saw a man crouched by our door, wielding a large blade. Dad shouted through the door that the police were coming, then dialed 911. The man eventually disappeared. A few days later, the local paper reported police had captured a disheveled stranger carrying an axe, matching our description. As a young child, I was engrossed in cartoons in the living room when I heard my mother calling me from downstairs. I replied, but she didn't answer, so I crept to the basement steps. Halfway down, I called again. Silence. Frightened, I climbed back up, only to hear her voice once more, insistently calling from below. Peering into the pitch-black cellar, I saw no one. I bolted upstairs in tears, and Mom rushed down, assuring me she hadn't been calling. She checked the basement and found nothing, brushing off my terror, but I'll never forget that voice. My grandfather lives on a quiet farm 2 hours away with his wife, Mary Ann, and their little Boston Terrier, Sherry, named after a late friend. Every evening, he walked Sherry along a dirt path beside the woods. One sunset stroll, Sherry barked and lunged at a hooded stranger passing by. Grandpa greeted him, but the man ignored the greeting and kept walking. Soon, Sherry began yapping at a tree where moments earlier, the stranger had disappeared. Sensing danger, Grandpa hurried home, pepper spray in his coat pocket. Suddenly, he felt a gloved hand clamp over his mouth and nose. Sherry bit and barked as Grandpa fumbled out the spray, unleashing multiple blasts. The assailant screamed and released him, allowing Grandpa to stumble back indoors unharmed. I lived in a rough Los Angeles neighborhood where the Crips were known to roam. My friend Stevie D and I, both 12, often biked around, and one night dared to explore a reputedly deserted house. At the front window, we saw what looked like a face peeking through curtains, but on closer inspection, it was a realistic severed head replica someone had planted. Intrigued, we snuck in through the unlocked back door, careful not to switch on the lights. In the living room, we picked up the head and dropped it in horror when dark fluid oozed out. It was real. 2 cracks in the ceiling hinted someone upstairs. We dashed out, jumped on our bikes, and fled. Later, authorities confirmed it was a victim's head left as a gang warning. Last year in my rural hometown, a man knocked on my front door around 9 p.m. Rare for our area. My mother answered, and he introduced himself as starting a new business, asked if she preferred American-made goods, and handed over a Clorox sample. He returned to his van, opened it, and pulled out what he called a vacuum cleaner, at which point I saw a second man inside. My mom yelled for me to grab my phone, but I couldn't find it, so I took my knife instead. She tossed the sample on the porch, threatened to call the police, and ordered them off the property. They sped away and were never seen again. An adrenaline junkie since childhood, I frequently skied upstate. Last winter, my friend Q agreed to join me for backcountry skiing and camping. After a 3-hour drive and off-road trek, we set up camp and scouted nearby hills. While skiing down a steep slope, Q and I lost sight of each other. At the base, I spoke with another skier who asked for directions and offered to introduce his wife, but I never saw her. Something about his gear reminded me of Q's, but the voice was different. As I led him back toward camp, he suddenly grabbed my leg. I felt a searing pain. He'd stabbed me. I fumbled for my flare gun in the tent, fired a warning shot, and saw the knife embedded in my leg. I demanded to know Q's location. The attacker said he was downhill. I called 911, then shot another flare. Moments later, a rescue helicopter arrived, plucked me up, and helped locate Q, unconscious, and also stabbed. Both of us recovered after hospital treatment. In my small college town apartment, I'd often step outside late to smoke and study. One weekday at 2:30 in the morning, I saw a drunken stranger knock on the door of a neighbor girl I barely knew. He introduced himself, stroked her hair several times, and slowly edged past her threshold. Troubled, I slammed my textbook against the railing until he abruptly vanished. We reported it to the police and sat with a sketch artist. Once the composite was released, tips flooded in confirming he was a serial rapist who posed as a cab driver to attack women leaving bars. Luckily, living steps from downtown thwarted his plan. I once responded to a Craigslist ad for a ping pong table. The seller invited me to his home that night. I parked, texted him, and walked quickly to the door. He shook my hand, then led me downstairs to the table, apologized for forgetting the paddles, and went upstairs to fetch them, locking me in. Bored, I snooped, finding only odd-framed photos of him alone and a drawer of yellow folders labeled A to Z. A half-open desk drawer revealed Polaroids of a bound, gagged girl. And real horror. I grabbed 3 screwdrivers, used the thinnest to jimmy the basement door's lock, escaped, drove straight to the police, showed them the photos, and gave them his address. Days later, they arrested him for running a child porn operation on the dark web. At 14, I babysat a 6-year-old boy named Cody. His parents warned me he talked to an imaginary friend and warned not to let him into their room. One rainy afternoon, Cody played in the basement chatting with Agnes. Suddenly, one of his crank-activated toy cars sprang to life on its own. Cody told me, "Agnes is driving it." That night, as I washed my hands in the bathroom, Someone knocked. Calling Cody, I opened the door. No child in sight. Then I heard a slow creak as the bedroom door at the hall's end opened. In the dark, I found Cody sitting on his bed, staring at me. He whispered. Agnes opened it. I carried him back to the living room until his parents returned. When they asked me to babysit again weeks later, I never called back.